And I was rehearsed that line over and over 1,000 times that day. And then just before we were about to start recording, there's like 50 people there, crew directors and ADs and extras and blah blah. A part of my brain went, oh,
you've forgotten it.
Forgotten all of that. And you go, why have you come now?
But I would always encourage not using word for word script.
Mum, I'll have chicken vindaloo and 5 poppadoms and a peshwari naan. How do you know I was going to ask you that? Well, Mum.
So actually, I took all of that so literally that I just walked towards him and went, yes. And I didn't feel a thing.
Say I was learning about the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
I'd have a bit of Paco Rabanne.
No one else would say that about anything else. It's like, oh, I should be just immediately good at badminton.
I don't know how to practice. I practiced there at the end. No star pow. Done it.
Well, was that your practice?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever, like, I don't know how to practice. Have you ever thought that?
No, I've always thought I know how to practice.
Are you sure? Did you always practice?
Yes.
Because I feel like I didn't.
With public speaking?
With anything that was, like, I'm thinking about my time in Gosainen College many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And
in the 80s.
And my wonderful teachers, Matthew Belgo and Mike Waters, and Viv Buckley and so many others, they must have been blue in the face because they were like, you just need to practice. Like, actually do. So you do monologues for drama schools, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you have an audition for drama schools, you go in and you go, hi, I'm Charlotte Lewis and I'm going to be doing Lavinia from Titus Andronicus. And then you do it and you know, get into the mode. Now, the last thing on my list was to practice, but I was so desperate to get into drama school at that time.
You didn't practice your monologues?
Didn't really practice them.
What?
I would wait. I know, it's ridiculous, isn't it? I would wait until the sessions with my teachers and they'd be like, Charlotte, have you even practiced this? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, it's no different from the last time you did it.
Is it because...
So bless them.
And I mean this with all due respect. Is it because you thought you were already good or because you couldn't be bothered?
No, I thought I already should be good.
Right.
So this comes back to the kind of talent question, right? I thought, you shouldn't have to practice. You should just be talented.
Oh, that's rubbish.
I think that was... I was brainwashed by that idea. And all of my teachers around me were going, that's crap. What really... what should be the case really is that you practice and you earn that right to go to drama school. But I was 17 and then 18, so
yeah, I think
it's an art practicing.
I think there. I think the whole thing of some people are natural born performers. I think that we spoke about this in another podcast. I think there are so many variables that come into it that makes one seem like a natural born public speaker. Could be their upbringing, their parents, where they were raised in the world. If they were America, they do a lot of public speaking in schools. So it may come across that you're natural. Or if you're in a house
they're not practicing,
where they story tell, or you mentioned about your friend from Merthyr Tydfil who went to the pub a lot and shared stories. But why not have that, and I say this with air quotations, natural talent, but if you combine that with practice, you can become really unstoppable.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's what they were trying to say. But there was something that really held me away from practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's that once you invest in practice, you've got something to lose because you've actually made an effort.
Wow.
So if I've practiced this and it goes wrong or it's still a bit rubbish, I've got loads to lose.
But only to you, though. So if you practiced on your own, like I practice most of the time on my own, yeah? Mm-hmm. So if I practice loads on my own, that's actually a good point. If I rock up to something, I never, ever, 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 ever say how much I practiced. Because if I've practiced loads, I turn up and do something and it's not quite, doesn't go to plan, Usually, fingers crossed, does work out. But if it then fails, people go, it still didn't quite work, even though he practiced. So I try and keep how much I
to
practice.
yourself.
At the same time, though, if I do a job and I say to, like, I don't know, say if as a producer, I say, oh yeah, I know my lines, I went over them last night really well. It puts them at ease, but I don't do that too much to raise the bar too high.
Yes, because if someone, I'm just thinking of it in more of a kind of corporate environment. If they said, "Oh,
Absolutely.
I've been really trying to get this right. I've been practicing and practicing and practicing, whatever," and then they do their presentation and it doesn't quite go to plan or how the impact, they've kind of come at it with big expectations. Whoever's heard that they've been practicing comes at it with big expectations, and actually that brings me to like the type of practice that is most effective. What is, like, for you when you practice?
Yeah.
What's the most effective form, or what do you do that's like, yeah, that's the good ingredients of a good practice,
Good ingredients for good
or a
practice.
rehearsal, or
I would say try and imitate the thing for real as close to possible as you possibly can. I don't know, like say if you're going to be doing a conference or a talk in front of loads of people, you obviously can't do that. But can you imagine it? I do a lot. I do use my imagination.
a lot of visualization.
Loads, all the time. I'm imagining the people. I'm imagining the eyes looking at me. What they're going to wear. What are the seats? What's the smells going to be like? I hold something in my hand that maybe would replicate a mic. I've done that. I do that all the time with bottles of hairspray. Not mine, by the way. Oh gosh.
Definitely all his.
They are mine.
Buys them in bulk.
So I do that. So
Yeah.
like so say for example I have to have a script in my hand. I'll hold my script with hairspray.
Yeah.
So then I know that my hands are full, which sounds like a weird thing to do, but I think it kind of works.
That's developing the muscle memory, isn't it? I just want to pick up on something that you said about imagining and visualizing the crowd. That was actually part of when I went to counselling, and that was one of the factors of like, I feel like everyone's judging me, or I feel like they're not enjoying themselves. She said, when you're preparing, how are you imagining their faces? And I was like they don't enjoy it. And it was like, well, this is going to be a bit of a vicious cycle, isn't it? Because if you're imagining, oh, this won't land, and the faces are a little bit like cut off and uninterested, that's kind of what you're going to get. So do you want to know something that I did, which was like really extreme to rectify this?
Rectify what?
To rectify those visualizations.
Okay.
So because I found it so difficult to visualize people like, yeah, well done, that's so great. On Canva or like stock footage, you can get like people in the audience. You just type in like supportive audience, and they're like,
oh, this is clapping.
Yeah. And I did my presentation to that screen.
Really?
Yeah, I swear down.
That's a fun way to do it.
Do you know what? I don't even care if that sounds super lame.
No, it's not. It's not lame at all.
Sometimes that's the quality of practice that's needed, not knowing your lines off by heart, right? It's actually practicing a positive visualization, something that will help you in the moment, because that then put me at ease, and it made me think, actually, I'm going to do it for the audience.
Yeah.
For the audience member who's connecting with this, who's engaged. And actually, ever since then, I don't have a problem imagining that now. I don't even think that I do have to imagine that anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's and I think, but you would do it and people may think, oh, Charlotte is quite a natural speaker or whatever, but I can guarantee that the best people in this world practice all the time. And I don't know what it is. I think people kind of either put it off because they don't want to.
Definitely.
Because it's probably quite a lot of effort, especially if you're not used to public speaking. It takes a lot of energy.
It's a lot of energy.
And courage.
Yeah.
Even if you're on your own, it can feel quite alien.
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of like going to the gym and flexing that muscle. But a nice example of people who, there's a couple of, when I do a lot of like sports matches and stuff, and often you have broadcasters there like S.O.S, and you have sometimes the presenters who are there and they're about to go live and, interview players or whatever. I'm not like watching them, but I just noticed that when they're off camera, they're kind of in the corner looking at their phone, going over lines, and I can see them muttering to themselves.
Yeah.
A little bit like Professor Quirrell in The Philosopher's Stone. Do you know when he sat up in the stands?
and
Snape and Quirrell. They're both muttering his little counter curse. Like they're just there, like talking,
Yeah.
and he's going over your lines.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the final product, you think, oh, that looks natural.
Oh, they're so natural. Exactly. But
But
they've put it into practice.
yeah, even right up to that moment.
I was going to say, even up to the kind of bitter end.
I do that too, but usually because I don't know why this is. I sometimes forget lines quite easily, and I think I find it harder in Welsh. By the way, I did a drama recently where I had to remember this not big, like like a news report. I was outside of a school and my character, and I had to report on a crime that had just happened, and it was like, we're here at Bontworth High School where a murder has taken place, that kind of thing. And I rehearsed that line over and over and over and over and over and over 1,000 times that day. And then just before we were about to start recording, there's like 50 people there, crew directors and ADs and extras and blah, blah. A part of my brain went, oh,
you've forgotten it.
Forgotten all of that. And you go, why have you come now? And it's just a weird thing.
Yeah.
But because I known I practiced it,
yeah,
and I knew how to practice it, it was just in the part of my brain. Yes.
You can trust that it's there. When you don't practice it that much, you don't have the level of trust that it's there somewhere. So I can't remember who says this. I think it's like Vin Jiang who says in one of the elements of practice is to put your paper down, and instead of like when you run it through and you think, right, what's the next bit that's coming up? Instead of looking at the paper for a prompt, you just pause and just imagine that you're grabbing at that little bit of text or the next bit. Just trust that it's there in the ether.
Yeah.
That comes from practice. Again, not hammering it line by line perfectly, but knowing where are the islands, where's the stepping stone, where's the next stepping stone. Like your case is a really specific one, right, for being on screen. But for most people with a presentation, they might just have to think, oh, the next bit, it's a stepping stone. I don't have to use the precise words that I've used in the rehearsal before. And actually, it can be your undoing. So one thing that I've noticed a lot with, and I did this when I was learning monologues, you'd learn it in certain rhythms, right? To be or not to be, that is the question, whether 'tis nobler in the mind, whatever. Like, doubtful it stood, as two spent swimmers that do cling together. Like that, I learned when I was 16, and it's in the same rhythm. So the melody or the music part of our brain spans quite broad. So we're going to remember that easier than the text because it's in a different part of the brain. And it's the same with like physical and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But if you get too wedded to that, if you put one foot wrong on the rhythm, and I saw that actually recently when I was one of the judges on the Rotary Youth Speaks competition, they were wedded to the melody.
Yes.
And so something got disrupted in a moment. I think someone coughed in the audience and it distracted them. The melody had gone. So it's like going, what's the Addams Family? Doodle-doo. Doodle-doo. Imagine if one of those goes and you're like, do I go back or do I go forward?
Yeah.
Doodle-doo.
It puts you off.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
What you're saying is don't get too methodical into mechanical and how you remember stuff when it comes to practicing.
Yeah, and wedding it to melody.
You taught me, Ross O'Hennessy spoke about that as well. He's an actor, he was in Game of Thrones, and he said that when you're doing theatre stuff, I haven't done any theatre, but I can imagine, but you can apply this to anything, that if you rehearse and, right, I'm going to come on stage, put my drink down, say a line, go to centre stage, say my line to the character, turn around, sigh, turn the light switch off and exit. But if if someone's moved the lamp a bit to another table, all of a sudden your whole pattern has been disrupted.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be careful of that. One thing I do find is quite useful though, and I don't want to bombard people, there are loads of different ways to do this, but this is something that I found quite useful. But two things actually. Number one is if you create a story around your speech or your script. So say if in your wedding speech you want to talk about 5 stories, imagine you're going into a house and the first story takes place in a living room of the house. What can you smell? What can you see? What can you feel in that story? Then move into the kitchen, then move into the dining room and visualize the house.
Memory palace, isn't it? They call it.
That's it. Memory palace. Another one is spray cologne or aftershave on your arm. So I did this in my exams. No, trust me.
This is amazing.
I did
Yeah,
this in my
no, I
exams.
believe
So I was
you.
forgetting stuff. I would say I was learning about the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
I'd have a bit of Paco Rabanne for Industrial Revolution. So I'd be smelling there and reading and smelling and reading, smelling, reading. Then I wanted to learn a bit about World War One. A bit of Lacoste Red. A little Lacoste Red. I didn't have all these perfumes. I was lending it off people. Smelling Lacoste Red, learning about it. Then I'd have a bit of Lynx Africa about World War Two. So when in the exam then, I'd smell like, I don't know, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. I'd be sat there with all
So
these
you had
different
all
smells.
of the different smells.
I had like 5 smells in my arm to try, and it sometimes worked,
Try
sometimes
and
didn't
trigger
work.
that
But
memory.
I was desperate. I wasn't a very good student.
Well,
And one more thing I
yeah.
always used to do, and I find this really useful. Say you have a page of script you want to learn. Instead of having all the paper there, try having the first sentence of each paragraph on a separate paper. Once you get familiar with that, have the first word of each paragraph, then have the first letter. And eventually you can just glance at the letter and know that this is the first word. Because often,
if you're doing it scripted,
if you're doing it
which
scripted,
is not a lot of people typically. I would say, like, typically, I would advise not to learn a script unless you're a performer.
unless you have to use a specific type of script, is what you're saying. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Unless
that's fair enough.
unless you're a performer, broadcaster, unless it's like really stipulated, or even when it comes to maybe media trainings where you have to be really specific, or if it's in legal proceedings, something like that. But I would always encourage not using word for word script. So something I wanted to come back to with the smell. So smell, like music, smell is the number one trigger in associated with memory. So it's the last sense that goes with different disorders that are associated with memory, like dementia or Parkinson's. Smell is a big activator. It's very, very nostalgic. If you've got a perfume or something like a smell, we went to Wales Perfumery and there was lots of different smells, and some of them really kind of evoke this memory that you didn't even know it was there. So it's super, super powerful. The most powerful one associated with memory is rosemary, actually. So a lot of people use rosemary in a what are they called? A diffuser, when they're studying and things like that. And that's a really good one for triggers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying essentially that you've worked with a lot of people on this kind of thing. Would you say that different people require different ways in order to practice, or do you think there's a one size fits all?
I think they definitely, I think we should always work to play to our strengths. So what I would say is, it's funny that you said about actors using blocking for things like memory. A lot of actors say this. They say, I won't remember the words until I do the blocking. And that's the moving around, that's the picking up the drink or moving the lamp or whatever else.
Yeah.
Now, for other people, it might be a visual trigger. For other people, it might be a smell. For other people, we've all got these different ways of the more activating triggers. Now, when it comes to practice, I would say don't wait for the perfect conditions.
Yes.
And I would say for everyone across the board, the bigger you can practice, the more likely it's going to stick in your bones.
The bigger you practice. Do you mean in terms of physicality?
Out loud, big physicality. Now, what tends to happen is people sit behind their computers and they write their little talk and they prep their talk, and then they never stand it up. And the first time they stand it up is in front of people. And I just think that is a sensory overload. So even talking about the things that we were talking about, like using visualization, imagining the people. I actually remember working with a client and I said, right, close your eyes. Imagine that they're, people are walking in and they're saying, oh yeah, I can't wait to hear so-and-so speak. Yeah, I was really excited. Even that, she was really kind of overwhelmed and went, gosh, I feel really nervous now. I was putting the client in a controlled stress situation. So what you get to do in that form of practice with a coach is a little bit like a yoga class where we're not doing the things that would stress us in real life, like getting a crappy email or, having some bad news or picking up heavy boxes, you're doing asanas, but it's controlled because you've got your guru there, you've got your teacher or whoever. And if you fall over, doesn't matter. AKA, if you had that bad news and you didn't deal with that stress well, that would have consequences. In a yoga class, it doesn't. So it's the same with rehearsing with a coach. If I'm saying things like, oh yes, can't wait for so-and-so speech, blah, 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 they can deal with that stress with me and go, oh, I feel really nervous. And we go, let's work with that. So whatever that trigger is in the practice realms, that's what's really beneficial to work through. And then from there, I'll start to think, okay, what's their weakest muscle? So for them, it might be gesture they don't feel especially comfortable with.
Yeah.
But I can tell in everyday life, they use gesture really freely. But in this situation, they're suddenly arms down by their sides or arms folded. So what I try and do is through practice, develop the congruency between who they are day to day
Yes.
and who they present.
And that should align.
Yeah,
It should align. Like, I know you said about the buzzword of authenticity, and it's not just a sexy term because for the sake of it. I do think we live in a world now where people, who they are when they perform and when they are performing, is sometimes not exactly aligned.
Yeah.
You do sometimes get a strange example of people in media where there's one guy, I can't remember his name now. He used to do stuff for Capital, I think. And apparently he used to like also speak in social settings like, hi, how are you? Good, thank you. I'm going to get the garlic bread, please. Thank you so much. Like,
I love that voice so much. Now on now that's what I call music. I
CDs,
love that voice. I don't know who birthed it, but I love it.
I love the 90s like love CDs. It's usually
Now that's what I call music.
They're about to fall asleep in bed and like, oh my god, I'm gonna pass out. You're watching telly, and it would be like, one CD for you and your love, featuring tracks from, and it would be like this cross dissolve of like,
yes, the wavy lines.
My love needs you, your love is I, and all this kind of. And who can forget the classic, My Heart Goes On, all for a fix. Oh, that kind of like, I love those adverts. We should bring those adverts back.
I would love those.
On a bit of a side note, you talk about practicing. And I think you asked me at the beginning, do you find it hard to practice? I was raised in a household where we were practicing all the time. My mother used to practice, before coming into a room, would practice her lines. So I'd be sat playing PlayStation 2, and I could hear my mother coming from another room going, right, you're going to get Indian. What should we get? Should we get this? I'll go ask Luke. Luke, what do you want in Indian, boy? Luke, what would you like? Just naan bread?
Really?
What would you like? Luke, what would you like in Indian? Oh, door, but Luke, hi, ma'am. What would you like in Indian, boy? And sometimes I would do this. I would preempt it and answer her, and she would be. I felt like it was a secret power. So, Luke, boy, what would you like in Indian? Luke, we're going to get Indian. What would you like? Ma'am, I'll have chicken vindaloo and 5 poppadoms and a peshwari naan. How do you know I was going to ask you that? Well, ma'am, I have
derailed.
Completely, but she would do it all the time. So I was
really, that's so
all
funny.
the time, and I don't know why she would practice her line before coming in.
practice her line.
Do you do that? I practice. Maybe this is an anxiety thing. I'm not saying I've got anxiety, but I've definitely got some kind of thing about wanting to look good, people pleasy kind of vibe.
Yeah.
I, before having a conversation with someone, practice what I'm going to say before I have a chat with them. Do you do that?
No, so I never used to do that.
Oh my gosh.
But actually, what I would say is that's quite useful in a way. So what I do is I practice what I think about things out loud in the car, and I record it, and then I listen back to it, and I go, is that really and do you know what's nuts is I nod along sometimes. I'm
what?
Like,
to your points?
That's a good point. Or sometimes if it's been a while, I preempt it and I go, oh, you missed out that bit, and then it's the next sentence, and I'm like, good, there you go.
Wow.
But actually that has really helped me understand what I feel about things and how to articulate them out loud. Because often we think, oh, I know what my opinion is. How often do we speak those out loud? Unless someone asks us. And how rare is that? So actually, what's interesting, right, is we don't develop, out of all of the things that we have, the voice. Oh, what are you laughing
No, go on.
at?
No. I'm imagining you talking to yourself in the car.
In the car, just absolutely rabbiting away.
I do that too. I was driving and I asked myself, So, look, the history of Wales. Do you think it's possible that we have been downtrodden in the past in terms of colonial power? Well, Luke, and I have a conversation
Was
with
this like a
myself.
fake? I think people do it with an acceptance speech. Do you know Lady Gaga, I think it is,
Yes.
used to work in a like diner, and it used to be empty like all the time. It was like 4 customers who always used to come in, and she used to walk into the center like with a mop and be like, "I'd like to thank the Academy," and do a speech, and they'd be like, "Woo!" and whatever. And then now she's like, "Well, thank God I practiced."
Exactly.
I
In the
do
diner.
think there's something really interesting about practicing and developing a relationship with your voice in that way, though. Hearing things out
Ooh.
loud, like your thoughts. So a lot of people, kind of write down their thoughts or just kind of ruminate or whatever. But actually speaking things out loud, I think does something very impactful because you're hearing yourself speak those words. I think this is where this is maybe going off topic a little bit. Affirmations for some people feel very uncomfortable, like looking in the mirror and saying, "I am great," or I
Do
know
you do
you
that
do that thing in the mirror, don't you? Like, "You've got this," or something before you do.
all the time?
Yeah. And I think you've gotten to a place of comfort. For many people, I don't think they'd be there in that sort of comfort zone of doing something like that. But I do think there's something super powerful about that.
It's quite a private moment, though. I
Yeah.
wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do that moment in front of people.
No.
But when I first started, and I wanted to rehearse what I would say or questions I'd ask or what the links were going to be, I would sometimes take myself to another room. Now I can be in a car with people who I'm working with or whatever, and just go, "Oh, give me a sec, guys. I'm gonna go over my lines," and I won't be in the car like, "Well, welcome to today's," in the car. I'll be going like, "Right then, welcome to today." I'll be muttering to
Yeah.
myself again, like Professor Quirrell,
Yeah.
with zero self judgment or
Self-awareness.
awareness.
Yeah.
And
That's a great stage to get to because I think you then think, I want to get this right more than I want to look cool.
again, yeah, definitely. And I'm doing an acting class at the minute called Meisner Technique, and Meisner talks about, I can't remember the phrase for it. It's a cool terminology that he says about when we are playing with a character and doing lines and stuff, that we should be thinking about when, imagine there's someone on a bus doing makeup, and it's like we aren't aware that people are looking at us, and then all of a sudden we're aware that people are looking at us.
Yeah.
But then you kind of go back into the makeup, and when you're acting with someone and you're thinking, your self-awareness comes in of going, "Oh my gosh, I'm vulnerable," or "I'm being a bit weird," or "I'm being a bit thing." Try and think about that person putting makeup on, of like, I'm just putting my makeup on. Screw everyone else, including the doubtful thoughts in your head. So when you're practicing, but I don't know how to get to that point, because I've got to the point where I'm confident doing it, but I don't know how one gets to that point.
So that for me is almost like going into, you have to put yourself in the boxing ring with that stuff, because that's a really loud voice. And I think we talked about this in another episode, but when you go to practice, you are going to meet all of those voices. They're going to come up, because like in that controlled stress situation where your body feels a different way or you feel a little bit nervous or whatever, those voices are typically reserved for in those moments of stress in front of the microphone or whatever talking opportunity you have. So I would say practice is a really good way to meet those demons, to get really well acquainted with them. Now, someone said, who we worked with in TED Talks, Graham, he said about running, one of the best pieces of advice that he can give for long distance runners is, he said, along the journey, there's going to be the demons. There's going to be the voices. They're going to say things like, "Oh, you don't really think you can finish this, do you?" Or like, "Oh gosh, this is awful. Why do you do that?" Or however that voice manifests.
Yeah.
He said, have answers for the questions they ask. And I thought that was really beautiful. Like, "Why are you doing this?" Have that answer, so that when you're in that moment, you're not having to find it with this sort of dwindling energy. And I think it's the same thing for practice. Like if I stand up and I go, "Oh, you're not going to stand like that, are you?" Or "You're not going to use that gesture." In that environment of practice, you've got time to stop and go, "Yeah, okay, why am I using that gesture? Well, I'm using it actually because I want to point at this. I want to draw attention here. And that's useful to the audience because," And so you've reaffirmed your decision rather than in the time, at the time, sorry, when you're performing, you're going, what are you doing with your hands? And then you're like, oh, I don't know. And you've had no time to work with or answer that demon's questions. I think that's, it feels like going into the boxing ring. But the more you go into that boxing ring, the less voices come up. Absolutely. Because I used to be absolutely kind of crippled by those voices.
Yeah.
Because it would be like, well, if you do it like that, then it can't be like this. And if you do it like that, or what if you do that? Well, maybe you should include this. But it was like walking into a room, like a concert hall of those voices. But the more you practice and just make a decision and have that forward momentum, the better it gets. And the one by one, those voices quieten down. And actually recently was like the first time I think ever I stopped halfway through and went, oh my gosh, I haven't heard any of those. And it does quiet them. There was recently, I did a fire walk. So I walked across hot coals and they were 1,800 degrees. And we had prep beforehand, which was about an hour and a half long. And it was about the mindset. And we had to practice the mindset. So the whole idea was that you walk with purpose. It's like, that's my destination. That's where I'm going. I'm not looking on the floor beneath me. I'm not thinking about the other things that are going on. I'm not listening to the people. I'm just thinking, that's where I'm going. And he said, this was an amazing piece of advice. If you have he said, give yourself a mantra. So it could be something like, you know, that moment where you're listening to your favorite piece of music and you're like, oh, yeah, I can do this. It's lovely.
Yeah.
No matter what mood you're in, it always brings you up. He said, that's the switch. That's where I want you to go. So have a mantra that can shortcut you there to that positive. So not something like, crap, F, Jeff, blah. Like no swear words because they're all negatively low vibration. They're higher vibration, like the easiest one is yes.
Yeah.
Say it as many times as you can so that none of those gremlins have an opportunity to interrupt. So it's like what you said on another episode about being interrupted.
Yeah.
Don't give them any opportunity. So actually, I took all of that so literally that I just walked towards him and went, yes, 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 yes. And I didn't feel a thing. And I didn't have any thoughts about walking over hot coals for 5 meters.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's the same stuff.
It is the same stuff. I think people get worried about what it takes to practice. So, and like sometimes people maybe overcomplicate it. I think there's a perfect way to do it. I guess it is a bit cliche, but I guess just starting and just doing it when it comes to public speaking, if you're quite new to it, get used to, you know, everyone's got a smartphone now, or most people do. Like practice on your front camera. That's a nice simple way to do it. Get used to. We spoke about this in another episode too. Get over the fear of hearing your own voice. A lot of people don't like that.
Habit
so
stacking.
Get rid of that. Get rid of that like kind of fear surrounding hearing and seeing yourself.
Habit stacking was one that I was just gonna. Sorry to interrupt, but to comment on, because a lot of people think that you have to have quiet space, nothing else going on, whatever. Like we've both said, we do this while driving a car.
Yeah,
obviously do that safely, but like you can mutter to yourself while you're brushing your teeth, or you know you can always put post-it notes for those stepping stones, those areas that you're going to talk about on the mirror, and then just think, before I go to bed, I'm just going to wash my face, brush my teeth, and just refresh, just say them out loud. So you can always habit stack to something that you do every day, having a shower and going through your talk, walking the dog. You know, you can plug in your headphones. You just look like you're on the phone. So mutter it out loud.
Muttering out loud.
But finding a way that works for you, I think, is...
Yeah, I don't know if there is a best size fits all, really. Everyone does it in different ways. Like with me, my main thing is like remembering things. I find that I'm quite... I'm not... A lot of people think that people who perform are naturally quite good at remembering lines. Yeah. I'm really not. Yeah. I forget things quite...
Work hard.
I know you could probably practice ways to do that, but I think what it is that I don't know if it's the way my brain works, but I've always found it quite difficult to remember in Welsh anyway. So I'm really good at ad-libbing though. So I'm quite good at doing like yes Andy stuff. So improvisation and thinking quickly. But when it comes to remembering lines, I remember once I did an audition. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but I had to learn some lines for this drama, and I had to play this character who was in a pub, and he was really upset about his member of his family passing away, and I had to almost get really angry in this moment, and he's kind of losing it, but in an emotional way, but a vulnerable way, but in a masculine way of I don't want to show I'm hurt, but I'm really angry, but I'm really hurt. It's quite a complicated scene to do, and it was at a stage where I was really confident, but I wasn't 100% on my ability and that I was really that good. Maybe I wouldn't call it arrogance, but I was really confident. I still am really confident, but I went through a year where I was like, yeah, I can do anything, which was quite nice. Myself and my friend Sam Cook are the exact same thing. Anyway, so I went to the audition and I didn't really practice or go through my lines really. I knew the gist of the scene, and I can't remember why I didn't practice. I can't remember if it was time or if it was I thought, oh, I'll wing it, or oh, I'll be fine. I don't know what it was, but I rocked up and I started doing the lines and I just forgot all my lines. So the first time I did it in this room and I just ad-libbed a lot of it.
Yeah.
And I got the gist of the scene over and done with. And it was either the director or the casting director, I can't remember, said, yeah, you're really good at ad-libbing, really good improv. Let's go again. But this time let's stick to the script. And she was lovely.
Yeah.
But she was kind of saying, all right, mate,
we
we get it, but can we see if you've remembered some lines, yeah? And what I probably should have done at that stage is one of two things. I probably should have said, I'm really sorry, I'm not off script. I've got to print it out with me. Could I have it with me and glance? Or just say, I don't know my lines and just own it.
Yeah.
I didn't do either of those things. I just kind of went for it and thought, I'll be fine. I'm also a bit of a hopeless optimist. I think I'm fine right up until the moment I've got to do something scary and then it all becomes real. Story of my life. Sorry, I didn't mean that, but like it's quite a scary thing. Yeah. Anyway, so I did it again. I couldn't remember any of my lines, and there was one bit where the character in the scene, I think it was this audition, takes his top off and becomes quite angry and irate. And I thought I could save the day by taking my top off, and I wasn't like fit.
This'll get him, kids.
I wasn't like fit, but I was like okay-ish.
You were like, listen, I'm going to throw my body at this.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
so I thought, I don't know my lines, I'll just get my top off. So I got my top off, and I swear to God, and she was so lovely, and she kind of like, I could see
she like, well, that was a choice.
I stood up, she looked in my eyes, and she looked at her body, and then made a note. And I went, I wonder what she wrote. And it wasn't a very good audition, but that was a very, 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 very embarrassing lesson of if you don't practice, that's what happens. And you may or may not get your top off. And it's not,
And the thing is, I do think like I've worked for a casting agent before and I've been on a lot of audition panels and we know when you
she
don't
knew.
know your lines.
I knew she knew.
It's so blatantly obvious. I remember an actor coming in and being like, so I've read the play and then I read it again and I read it a third time just to make sure, whatever. And then when he did the scene, he didn't remember any of it and again was ad-libbing and then just styled it out and was like, oh no, yeah, I really thought, I'd adapt it and whatever. And I was like, I'm really sorry, but I just don't buy it. You just don't know the lines. That's fine. But just say it exactly as you said. If you said, look, I'm not off script, I would have been like, fine. Because there's so many different reasons why actors aren't off script. It's things like timing. And actually, I think you can give yourself a bit of grace like that in other industries. If you have practiced this and you think, okay, I've practiced this this presentation, but actually the research is a little bit alien to me. You can have notes there and go, look, guys, I want to get this right. So I'm going to read this bit just because I want to get this absolutely perfect. But where it gets really sort of like, oh, wow, you haven't practiced this at all, is when everyone just dumps a load of text on their PowerPoint presentations and reads it. And I'm like, we might as well not be here. I'm really sorry. But there's no developing it, no bringing it to life, no honouring of your audience. You could have just sent them that info pack.
Absolutely.
I think it's admitting is have some grace with yourself, but equally admit when, you haven't done the work.
Yes, there's ways to do it in a way which is quite professional. Like newsreaders do it all the time, where they go, "We've had this report from the Met Police. I will now read the statement," and they read a bit of paper because they want to get it right. Also, there's
Yeah, sure.
legalities in that too.
Yeah.
But often they read something out and make sure it's right, and then they come back to the viewer. But instead of trying to style it out and looking down like, "Oh, I remember this," they go, "I will now read this bit, just so you're aware." So if you're doing a presentation and there's a bit in it that you're like, "Oh, this bit's a bit scary for me," and it's quite technical, or you're not confident, you can say, "Bear with me, folks. I'm just going to look down on my note for this bit. I want to make," you can always play this line as well. "I want to make sure I'm getting this right for you. Bear with me." And that's always better than trying to style it out. Like me going, "Oh yeah, I just like improv. This is part of my shtick. Yeah,
exactly.
I should have said, I don't know my lines. I'm really sorry. I want to give this my best, but I need my script here, and I'll do my best with that." But I didn't do that.
And part of the practice, I think, can be translating some of that. So if there is if there are some details that you do find quite unfamiliar, it's like actually investigate what they mean. Again, ask for help. How would you describe this in layman's terms? How can I translate this into a more commonly known reference? Like if it's a really difficult piece of tech, could you compare it to a car, something that everyone drives every day, or could you compare it to a mobile phone or something in a film or whatever, just so that you feel like, okay, I might not know the ins and outs of this, but I've got a worthy comparison where I feel comfortable. That's part of the practice as well, is going, how do I not wing this?
Do you think we live in a culture where we think we should wing everything?
Yeah, I think it comes back to that attitude that I had when I was 16, is that, oh, well, if I'm not good at it by now, I'm supposed to be talented. It's not talent, it's work. And it's like no one else would say that about anything else. It's like, oh, I should be just immediately good at badminton. Like, no, you got to put in the work. Like, can you imagine if a surfer went into the water and just was like, I should be good at this?
Yeah.
It's a skill.
Like in the movies.
Yeah, like we have the capacity to be great at things, and people will there's a different variance when it comes to how much work you have to put in. And yes, for some people it's going to be easier. For some people it's going to be harder. But I do think there's just this brainwashing when it comes to talent.
I would say though, just as a counter to that,
a caveat.
what I would say is that sometimes having to wing it is maybe unavoidable.
Oh yeah,
Hi Luke,
of
how you doing?
course.
Yeah, how you doing, boss? Okay, yeah, we're gonna do a presentation in 10 minutes time. So can't do it. Can you do it? Yeah, no problem.
Right.
Then you've got to pull it from your backside and give it your best shot. But if you have the option and ability and time and resource and effort to practice, always do that and don't rely on winging it unless you have to. If you have to wing it, of course wing it. That's my theory. So what do you think?
So I would say that's a really good point.
Okay.
I would also say prepare for the event that might show up. So for a lot of my clients, I say, okay, have you ever used a teleprompter before? And they're like, no, I've never been asked to use that. And I'm like, let's try it because you never know. Next week, they're using teleprompter with someone and it was sprung on them. So it's the same for like, why not get ready for that opportunity that hasn't shown itself yet?
Match fit.
Yes, exactly. Because listen, you might have been on the bench all season, but when you come off that bench, what was it, the Scarlets game recently, a guy came off the bench and within a minute won them the game.
Yeah.
And I just think that guy was match ready. Like that's the same as your boss calling you up and saying, we've got a presentation in 10 minutes. Imagine if you smash that presentation because you've been readying yourself, ready to be ready.
Erdine Swart, he came off the bench and scored the winning try of the game. And the floor manager from S.O.S said to me, that person is the player of the match. And someone off, like on the side, went, he can't be player of the match. He's just come off the bench. And the floor manager from S.O.S went, he's won you the game. He's my player of the match.
See?
And I thought, yes!
You'll always remember those people who do that. So actually, like, they're a safe pair of hands. You are going to be asked every single time. And what goes with that? Job promotions, pay rises, skills that have been noticed. I just think be ready to be ready. That's all practice is.
Ooh, I like that. Be ready to be ready. Be ready to be ready. Sounds like a CD advert.
Be ready to be ready. Now 40.
There you go. And on that note, I got nothing else.
Yeah, you had to have the last word then.
I know,
didn't you?
sorry.
He practices until you didn't practice the outro.
That, on a final note, how poignant. I would be so ready. I would prepare my intro. Hello, folks. I'm here
Yes.
now at the Goody Who pub, and I'm joined now by Charlotte Lewis. She's got a new EP out. I'd practice that bit within an inch of his life. Do the interview, got the questions, bam, bam, bam. In my ear, I'd be like, right, Luke, wrap it up. You got 10 seconds. I'd turn, and mine would go, Luke, you haven't practiced the outro.
I'm so glad you brought this up because this is something that people don't do, and they are the edges of the jigsaw. If you look after the beginning and the end, the middle would take care of itself.
Absolutely.
So how do you do that? You have to prepare an ending. Now, if you're at a loss at the end of the presentation, talk, whatever, you simply say, thank you very much. Full stop. You don't say the full stop. So you say, thank you very much. Because everyone knows what that means. Now, have you ever been to a play where they've clapped at the wrong time at the end? Where they've
The
been
audience?
like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
And then there's like another number. They're like, bam, bam, bam.
Yeah.
So what they have in a musical to avoid that. So typically you'd see that in plays. You don't see it in musicals because musicals have a thing called a button. Now a button is a final stop. It's like ba-dam, ba-dam, bam, bam, bam.
Yeah.
Or dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. We know it's the end. It's a button. So what is your button?
What is your button?
Yeah. So you have to have the beginning and your button.
Okay.
I've left you stunned.
I'm thinking there's definitely a sketch if someone does that. It goes dun bum 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 bum.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's one of those versions. My dad said he went to a night once where there was a guy playing on the drums, and my dad's mate was singing, and as a joke, it was the song, "Do you ever get one of those days? Do you ever get one of those days? Days. Do you ever get one of those days?" And the drummer would finish, and then after days, he would then go days, days, and the drummer would go back. And apparently, he was doing it to tire the drummer out. And by the end, the drummer was like, because he kept on going on to it.
Are you the drummer and I'm the singer right now?
Yeah, she finished there. Bye.
Dun 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 dun.
Wave goodbye.